Happy Sunday. Welcome to the Buddhist Recovery Network and A Taste of Freedom, brought to you today by Vimalasara. It's really lovely to have you here. Be surrounded in community and in our recovery practice. So I'd like to introduce Vimalasara now. And Vimalasara is an award-winning author of now 10 books. They're the co-founder of Mindfulness-Based Addiction Recovery, or MBAR, which is a secular recovery 8-week program, and a co-author and co-founder of 8-Step Recovery, using the Buddhist teachings to overcome addiction. Some of you may be very familiar with that book, and it is the Buddhist recovery version of 12-Step, basically incorporating a lot of mindfulness and meditation elements into your recovery practice. Vimalasara was the co-founder of Healing and Insight, which is a teaching faculty embracing Buddhist recovery in all its guises. They're now responsible for the programming of Buddhist recovery retreats at the Menla Retreat Center in upstate New York, chair of the Vancouver Buddhist Center, and a senior order member of the Triratna Buddhist community, the Triratna Buddhist Order. And they tour internationally as a public speaker and trainer in the field of addictions and emotional trauma. And you can find Vimalasara at the website ValerieMason-John.com. And welcome, Vimalasara. It's always lovely to have you here as a teacher. Thanks.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Siri. Lovely to see all of you, and well done for not getting caught with daylight saving today. So I just want to credit those of you who got here early. We had the great pleasure of listening to Freedom by John Baptiste, to Redemption by Bob Marley, and Freedom by Pharrell Williams. And today, this offering is called A Taste of Freedom. So we are going to begin with a meditation, and I really do hope that this practice will give you a taste of freedom. Okay, it's a practice that I developed to really work with that second dart of suffering. Yeah. You know, it's like, as we know, those of us who are struggling with addiction or have got addictive or compulsive behaviors, something happens. We have an argument with our partner. We have an argument with our partner, and that's the first start of suffering, because it's painful. You know, nobody likes having an argument. So we have an argument with our partner, and then we perhaps go out and we pick up our choice of addictive behavior to try and soothe the pain. And that's the second dart of suffering. Yeah. And how can we begin to learn to just be with that first dart of suffering? Yeah. And it is a practice. It really is a practice. And I will say that those of us who have addictive behaviors, a struggle with addiction, we often become a victim of that second dart of suffering. I mean, even myself, I'm abstinent from things like drugs and alcohol, and have been for a very long while, but there's still certain things where something can happen and I will go to the cashew nuts to soothe the pain, or I'll go to the chips to soothe the pain. And that's the second dart of suffering. Yeah. And if we could stay with that first dart of suffering, life would be so much easier. And so I've developed this practice, and it's a practice that I use myself now. And it really does help to just really become aware of what is happening. So, and we can use this practice when we sit to meditate and find ourselves assailed by the proliferation of thought. Yeah, because we know that we can be meditating and we can be on our cushion and it, you know, our experience is all nice and fluffy. And then wham, what happens? We're dragged into some argument that we had, or we're dragged into something that we're going to say to the person the next time we see them, and oh my God, and we're agitated and we're activated, and the enemy of the mind is just like kind of huge. And what do we do with that? And that is the second dart of suffering. So this practice is called RUST. I've called it RUST. I love working with acronyms. And as we know, the mind can get rusty. And when the mind gets rusty, we react, okay? When the mind gets rusty, we do things that perhaps we might regret after, yeah? So when the mind gets rusty, it's the whole thing, it doesn't function in a way that it needs to function, and it functions from a place of reactivity. So what would it be like if we could remove the rust from the mind? Yeah. We would, if we were able to remove this rust, remove that second dart, take that second dart out, we'd have the potential to act from a place of freedom. And we would have a taste of freedom. We would have the potential to act from a place of wisdom and a place of compassion. And those of you who are visual people, you could really imagine taking that second dart out, that second dart that gets rusty, and just literally, as you see with my hand, just put it out. It's like, here we go again, second dart of suffering, let's pull it out. Okay, so I will put this in the chat so that you can remember. So and I will actually post the PDF so you can take the PDF away with you. In fact, Siri, if you could actually post what the letters stand for, because I really want you to drop into this and not to think, oh, I want to remember, let me write it down. And I will actually put the PDF in the chat so that you can download it. Okay, so R stands for recognize. Okay, that's it. R stands for recognize. So if we could have that in the chat. U stands for understand. S stands for sensations. And T stands for trust. Okay. So if that could go in the chat, thank you. All right. So R stands for recognize. U stands for understand. S stands for sitting with sensations. And T stands for trust. Okay, so we are going to begin to practice, okay? So remember, when we're afflicted by this second dart, so when we're afflicted by thoughts crashing in, by getting completely distracted, we need to pull that second dart out and remind ourselves of this acronym RUST. Okay, so let me ring the bell. So inviting you to arrive fully here, now, onto your meditation spot, wherever that is. And just allow yourself to settle. Really see if you can just notice perhaps where your hands are. Notice where your feet are. And just really see if you can notice the body. And you might move the body as you begin to just think, oh, I'm sitting in an awkward position here, or I'm lying in an awkward position, or my leg or my back is in an awkward position here. And just move the body so that your body can completely support you in this practice. And we're going to have the sense of the mind dropping into the heart. So just really see if you can have that sense of the mind dropping into the heart, and you can visually imagine the mind dropping into the heart. So mind, heart becomes one. And mind, heart dropping into the body, into the guts. And then connecting to the wind element. Let's really see if you can connect to the wind element. Yeah, the breath in and out, in and out. I'm just going to invite you to perhaps bring something to mind, something small when you were just triggered or activated, and you might just be experiencing some activation right now. R stands for recognize, relax, recognize what is activating you right now. Pause and really see if you can catch what is whirling around in your mind. And as best you can, to just be with it, just be with this activation. Just recognize that all what's going on right now is activation. And there can be real freedom in recognizing we're activated. That's all what's going on. Real freedom in recognizing we've been triggered. Yeah. And if we can recognize that, it might help us to do something different. What is it that we need when we've been triggered or activated? U stands for understand. Understanding when you're activated or triggered, you're just caught in a story. That's all. You're just caught in a story. That's all what's going on. It's just a story. And you know what? We can step out of that story. Often these stories are very old stories. It's the same old story that keeps them going up. Nobody loves me. I've been abandoned. Nobody's listening to me. It's all their fault. And it's this story that keeps on playing over and over again. And understanding it's a story full of judgments, perceptions, and resentments. And often you'll see that this story changes every time you replay it in your mind. Yeah. And you could ask yourself, why am I still holding on to the story? Or what is this story doing for me? Because remember, you can always step out of the story. That's the freedom. S stands for sensations. And you may not even be in touch with the sensations that are happening in the body. So I invite you to search the body for sensations and notice that there's sensations going on in the body, that there's tension. Whenever we're activated or triggered, there's going to be tension. The jaw might be tight, the stomach might be gurgling, there might be itchiness in the groin or in the palms, or the breathing is heavier, yeah? Or you might be hot or even cold. These are sensations. And we can sit with sensations, and we can also stand with sensations. We can stretch with sensations. We can sway the body with sensations. If you're in a room on your own, you can even shout or scream with sensations. This isn't about sit with sensations and grit your teeth. Yeah. This is about having a taste of freedom. So if the sensations experience overwhelming, move the body. Yeah. Be somatic with the sensations. And see if you can feel any tension or restriction in your body. What does it feel like? Where are some of these sensations located in the body? Place a hand where you feel these sensations and give this part of your body some kindness. So it's just an invitation to place a hand on a part of the body where you experience sensations. And just know when our body is assailed with sensations and sensations have been activated in the body, what the body is doing is it's remembering past traumas, past hurts, past wounds. Yeah. The body keeps the score. And so when we're activated, sensations can arise in the body. The body is remembering. T stands for trust. Trust this too shall pass. Trust that these sensations are changing all the time and that you won't always feel this pain or discomfort. And for some of you, that story still may be playing out. There still may be activation. So if the story of what's happened is still playing in your head, tell it to be quiet. Ask the story to relax. Ask the story to step aside so you can let go of some of that rust that has accumulated in your life. Just ask it to step aside so you can have a taste of freedom, so you can have a moment of peace. Just ask the story to relax. Just ask it to step aside. You don't have to get rid of it completely. You know, some of us really love these stories, but we can just ask it to relax, tell it you can come back to it. But in this moment now, you're just going to ask it to relax and trust this too shall pass. So of course, when we are activated or triggered, we'll never remember the whole journey of rust. And this practice isn't linear. if we are activated, you may just call on rust. Just calling on the word rust may just make you kind of think, rust, okay, let me step out of the story. Or you may just call on the you. Oh, I'm understanding. I'm just caught in a story. I can step out of the story. Or you may just call on T and just trust that this too shall pass. Or the T, tell the story to relax so you can have some peace. Or you may just call on the R and recognize you have been triggered by something and you need to do some self-care. Or you may just call upon the S, sensations, and allow yourself to just sit with sensations or stand with sensations. And so now we're going to sit for 3 or 4 minutes and guarantee the mind will get distracted and thoughts will begin to percolate. And it's going to be an opportunity for you can call on any of the letters. And if you've forgotten, it's in the chat, and you're just going to call on the R or the U or the S and T and practice with yourself. Yeah, because really we cultivate freedom by doing the practice ourselves. Yeah. Often we can listen to these great talks, but we never go off and actually practice it for ourselves. So let's have a time of practice. I'm not going to say anything for the next 4 minutes, and allow yourself to practice rust. Pull that second dart of suffering out. So, welcome back to this portal. I'm going to speak for a few minutes and then invite questions. So, a taste of freedom. Those of you who have heard me speak again will know that one of the things that I say is that the Buddhist teachings is the oldest recovery program that we know of. Yeah. And I'll also say it's the oldest therapeutic program that we know of. So I'm not going to say it's the oldest, because we have to remember that the Buddha rediscovered the way. And so if the Buddha rediscovered the way, it's saying that actually there was a way even before the Buddha. Yeah. And just to let you know, in places like Burma, in certain places in India, the monks have been using the Buddhist teachings for addictions for years and years and years. And it's only here in the West that we've caught on over the past 10 or 15 years. Yeah. And I always say that I've been practicing now for 30 years, and there were many of us who came into the rooms of Buddhism and got our recovery in the rooms of Buddhism. We just did it quietly. We didn't say anything to anybody, but that's where we got our program. And that's where I got my recovery. I didn't get my recovery in the rooms of 12 step or in the rooms of Buddhist recovery, because there was nothing called as Buddhist recovery then. I got my recovery in the rooms of the Dharma halls. Yeah. And there is the word vimoksha, which means emancipation, freedom, or muti or vimutti. And all these words mean emancipation, liberation, freedom. Yeah. The experience of total freedom has always been vital to Buddhist teachings. That's what the Buddhist teachings are. If we think of the Noble Eightfold Path and the fourth noble truth, the path that leads us away from suffering, that is directing us and pointing us in the place of freedom. And it's often said that the Buddha once said that just as the great ocean has one taste, no matter where you taste that ocean, that one taste is the taste of salt. And the Buddha goes on to say that my teachings have one taste. And that taste is the taste of freedom, the taste of emancipation. Whether you study the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the bhumis, the fetters, there are so many teachings. You only need one of those teachings, and those teachings will give you a taste of freedom. And I just want to remind us that the intention of a spiritual life, no matter what that spiritual life is, I believe that intention of the spiritual life is freedom. Yeah. And we know many people are searching for freedom, and we get distracted. I think because we're searching for freedom, we mix freedom with enlightenment. We want freedom, and so we want the enlightenment. And I have to remind you that the Buddha didn't say, or the prince, he was the prince then, the prince didn't say, I will not move from this spot until I find enlightenment. The prince said, I will not move from this spot until I find an end of suffering, which is completely different. So if we're chasing the enlightenment, we most probably won't have the freedom. And many of us who have addictive behaviors, Many of us are chasing that enlightenment. We want the happiness, which is why we keep on habitually picking up, because we think that this will give us the freedom. Yeah. Because we're continually and habitually working to soothe the pain. And why wouldn't we want to soothe the pain? And if we go back to that important teaching of the prince vowing not to move from this spot until he found an end of suffering, what happened? In finding the end of suffering, he faced the suffering. Yeah, that's where the freedom is. He faced the suffering. Yeah. If we turn away from our suffering, then we move into this second dart of teaching. The second dart of suffering, or the second dart of teaching, because it is a teaching that we need to realize, this second dart. Yeah. And we have to learn to be with the suffering and know that this too shall pass, that there is an end to suffering. We have to remember in the Four Noble Truths, yeah, there is an end of suffering. Yeah. Remember the first one, it reminds us, yes, that there is suffering. Okay, there is suffering. It's not saying that life is suffering. Okay, let's get that clear. It's not saying that life is suffering. It's just saying that because we are born into this human form, and because we get attached, and because we don't like it when people die, when people leave us, and because when we're having a pleasurable time, when it goes, we resent that, we suffer. Yeah. And we create the second noble truth is telling us that there is a path that leads to more suffering with that second dart. And that third one reminds us that there is an end of suffering, that we can have a taste of freedom. And when we talk about emancipation, when we talk about freedom, when we talk about liberation in the Buddhist teachings, we're talking about emancipation and liberation from the three poisons, the poison of craving. Yeah. And those of us who have addictive behaviors will know what that poison is like: the poison of craving, the poison of hatred, the poison of delusion. And these teachings can give us emancipation, liberation from craving, from hatred and delusion. And if we are caught in that cycle, and we're caught in that vicious cycle of craving, if we're caught in it, we are going to be caught and assailed by hatred and delusion too. They're not separate, they're connected. Yeah. We think of that wheel of life, then that tiny hub, the cock, the pig, and the snake, and they're chasing each other round and around and around. They're interconnected. Yeah. And so, yeah, how can we begin to have this taste of freedom, this taste of freedom that the Dharma teachings promise? The Dharma teacher, I can say promise, the Dharma teachings promise us a taste of freedom. And we have to begin to look at what prevents us from being free from our addictive behaviors. And we can talk about the great stages of spiritual life. And those great stages of spiritual life is morality, yeah, ethics, yeah. So important for us to be in touch with morality, with ethics, yeah. Another great stage is meditation, concentration. Yeah. And another great stage is wisdom. So you can hear the threefold path in this. In fact, the threefold path expands open into the noble eightfold path. And if we are able to live this path, the promise of emancipation is there. And so I want to talk a bit about the 3 emancipations. There are 8 emancipations, and I'm not going to focus on the 8. I just really want to just unpack a bit the teachings of the emancipations. Yeah. And so the first emancipation that we can have is when craving arises. And I'm still in touch with craving, although I'd say that I am more or less free from those gross addictive behaviors that I've had. Craving could still arise. A couple of days ago, I was swimming in the swimming pool. I swim in the ocean, and I've stopped swimming. It's got a bit too cold for me at the moment. You know, sometimes I swim into December, but this year it's like, oh, I can't deal with this. So I've missed swimming. And so I was in the city and I went swimming in the swimming pool, and I'm in the swimming pool and swimming. And I found myself craving because I was thinking about when could I next be in the swimming pool, you know, because where I live, there isn't a swimming pool near me. So rather than just enjoying the experience of swimming, I'm already craving, craving, when can I swim next? But that was fantastic because I caught myself craving, and I just said to myself, Rust, you just activated, because remember, activation can be pleasurable. Activation um doesn't have to be unpleasurable. You know, when we're activated, it doesn't have to be negative or positive. It's just activation, excitement. You know, we can have excitement. And so I had this pleasurable activation, and I'm just caught in a story. Just let go of the story and just be here now. Yeah. And so on this first emancipation, when we find ourselves craving, one of the ways that we can have a taste of freedom, if we're unable to step out of the story, if we're unable to just recognize its activation, we can begin to reflect on the repulsiveness of the object. So we can begin to reflect on the repulsiveness of your choice of drug, or we can begin to reflect on the repulsiveness of porn, or we can begin to reflect on the repulsiveness of food. Yeah. And there is this deep practice of the repulsiveness of the body. We can really reflect on that, on the repulsiveness of the body. But this is one of the ways that it's said in the teachings that we can really begin to have freedom. And I know one of the places that I still do crave, apart from my gross addictions of the drugs and alcohol, one of my huge addictive behaviors was I was a chronic bulimic. And some of you might think, well, how is that an addiction? If you want to know, you can read the book 8-Step Recovery. But I'm telling you that that was even more lethal than any drug or alcohol that I took. What people don't actually realize is that when you're on these binges, you go into altered states, you go into trance, you go into a whole new realm, and nothing matters because you're in this realm. And then when you purge, you go into another realm as well. Yeah. And let me tell you, there were times when I purged and food would get stuck in my throat. I'd be jumping up and down. I couldn't breathe. And luckily, I'd get dislodged. It would collapse, and then I would be back up out again, finding something to binge on. Yeah, this craving. And now there are times, if that craving arises, I remember the repulsiveness, the repulsiveness of the food and purging, because actually now when I stand away from it, the repulsive behaviors that I did. And those of you who, have had, addicted to the drugs, the alcohol, there are the repulsive behaviors that we do. And we can just remind ourselves of the repulsiveness. Yeah. There is the second emancipation, and that emancipation is the emancipation that we have the freedom, we have the liberation. Yeah, the craving doesn't arise because we continue to reflect on the repulsiveness, and the craving doesn't arise. Yeah. And this is really important. It's very important because we know that actually people can be abstinent, or people can have their harm reduction for 10, 15 years, and what happens? Bang, they're helter-skelter back in their addictive behaviors. What happened? Yeah. And so we know what happened was that somewhere that craving was still arising, that craving hadn't been abated. Yeah. And we have to, sometimes you hear Dharma teachers say there's no time off the spiritual life. And I have to remember that there is no time off the spiritual life. And I love this third emancipation. This third emancipation is absolutely wonderful. It gives me goosebumps, because how many have had the intense appreciation of not craving? How many of you here today who have been abstinent for a year or 10 years and really have had the intense appreciation of not craving? And this is one of the emancipations. So I really invite those of you who have had freedom from your addictive behaviors to really cultivate the appreciation of having freedom. Yeah. Because we know when we are caught in this hell realm of addiction, when we are caught in this hell realm of addiction, we are enslaved. Yeah, we are enslaved. It's torture, it's madness, it's insanity. And to really to have the appreciation. There are times I go into the supermarket and I have such appreciation that I am not addicted to chewing gum. Once upon a time, I just chewed. I was a chronic chewer, and I couldn't go into the supermarket without not picking up this chewing gum. And even with my fillings and breaking my teeth, I would still be chewing. And I tell you, I have that real appreciation. I have that real appreciation when I go into the supermarket and I'm not dragged down the aisle somewhere. And I have that real appreciation that I have that freedom from the alcohol and the drugs, and also knowing that I have to remember the repulsiveness of some of those things, because sometimes when I am in an environment where it is, yeah, craving can arise because the conditions are there. We have to remember that those of us who have harm reduction and abstinent, we've taken ourselves out of those conditions which cultivate craving. Yeah. But we cannot be out of those conditions 24/7. And what happens when we go into those conditions where craving is stimulated? And what is it that we need to do? And again, we can call it on rust. Just even the word rust can make us step. Okay, that's a reminder. I need to remove myself, because I'm not in a place to go into the repulsiveness. I'm not in a place where I can stay here and know 100% that I will not pick up. And I want a taste of freedom. Yeah. So, a taste of freedom. A taste of freedom can be pulling that second dart out. A taste of freedom can be calling on the word rust, calling on recognizing we're caught in recognizing that we're activated, you understanding that we're just caught in a story full of judgments and perceptions. S, sensations. We have to come home to the body. In fact, the freedom is, and this is all what the Dharma teachings are about, the Anapanasati, the Satipatthana, the four foundations of mindfulness. They're all bringing us back home to the body, because that's where the taste of freedom is. And yes, I know how hard it is to come back to the body. It's a practice. And so this is why I say that with the sensations, I don't want you to just sit there and grit your teeth and, oh my God, it's just move with the sensation. Do a bit of somatic experiencing so you can begin to release the sensations, even scream or sing and release the sensations. And remember, sometimes I think it's the Dalai Lama who has summed up the Buddhist teaching in 2 words: everything changes. Yeah, it's fundamental teaching, impermanence. T, trust this too shall pass. It is going to pass. It may not pass as quick as you want it to pass, and it will pass. And if it's not passing, we can tell the story to relax. We can tell the story to step aside. We can even put the story into retirement. And I just want to say that as I bring this talk to an end, think about retiring your story. Let the story know you can retire, and if I need you, I'll bring it back. But actually, I'm going to give you early retirement. I don't need you anymore. Okay? And just put it into retirement. And if I need you, I will call upon you, but I'm going to put it into retirement so I can continue to have a taste of freedom. Thank you.
Well said. Yeah, so Vimalasara and also Valerie Mason-John, I think, is your one of the names that you write under. You're very well known as both. But your recent book, I just wanted to put this out there. It is called African Wisdom, New Voices Talk Black Liberation, Buddhism and Beyond. And so this is a book that you've edited, and it is a collaboration of Black Buddhist teachers. And it's quite something. I just wanted to let folks know that it's out there and encourage you to check it out. We have a teaching that you're doing in coordination with the East Bay Meditation Center, which is probably the most diverse Sangha in all of the United States. And it is a meta and action course, and it's on Mondays, which might work very well for folks to kick off their week. And it starts on November 22nd.
Yeah, on my birthday.
Yeah, on your birthday. What a beautiful birthday offering. There's a link for registration. And then finally, your ongoing teaching of mindfulness-based addiction recovery, which is, bringing a mindfulness practice to look at your addictions and to work with them. And that is a 28-day course. For 28 days, you're bringing something to everyone, and there's also an opportunity for coaching. So yeah, that's a lot that's coming up, and ways to stay in touch with you, and yeah, just appreciate all that you bring from your practice to ours, just the way that all of this emerges and it gets shared in such rich ways. So I think that might be all. Oh, there's one more announcement I'd like to make. There is a new podcast out on the Buddhist Recovery Network site in our podcast section. And it's by Panavati, who was our teacher last month. And it's called The Newness of Life. And I do have a link for that here.
And then to put the Dharma link again, as BRN runs on the generosity of you. That's how it runs on the generosity of you. And even though, because I'm president, outgoing president, actually, I don't take any of this dana, we just put it back in to the to BRN. Normally with the other teachers, we give them a split. So be really great if you could donate if you're able to. Sila Siri is going to be the new president coming in. And we'll ritualize that. I will be part of the advisory committee, so not going away completely. And Vanessa Wang will be the deputy president. So we look forward to seeing you the first weekend of December when we will have our Buddhist Recovery Summit. So do check us out. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's just really wonderful to have you here, and happy November. May the season be good to you. I'll leave